Hello everyone, it's Oz, founder and CEO of ArcoB. Today we're going to talk about the 6 key components of financial management on your architecture and construction project. Incurring financial problems on a property build-out is a terrible feeling. Indeed, many project and renovation have gone bust due to financial issues with the project or with the owners and funders. As an owner-manager, it is your prerogative to ensure that the financial management side of your project is fully handled, which means you need to understand both the nature of the industry as well as flow of money. Now, I've covered flow of money in a separate article and video on ArcoB, but just to share, the worst story I've ever heard was a couple who engaged in a renovation that was expected to take 12 weeks, which instead took 52 weeks to complete and cost 3.5 times as much as planned. This scenario is completely avoidable with some understanding and planning, and also just proper management of the financial process for a renovation or new build. Teaching you about these subjects is why we're here at ArcoB, and we offer our REACH programs to learn about property management, renovations, and new builds, as well as the best means and methods for all of these. We've identified 6 key components to manage on the financial side of your renovation project, which are budgets, cash flow, leveling, cost tracking reports and invoicing, contingency, and retention. First comes budgets. Now, a budget is a simple first step in understanding the cost of your project. I'm routinely surprised when I hear the amount of owners who not only work with just estimates and do not take the time to budget the full cost of their project from the start. Not budgeting your work is a recipe for cost overruns, sunk cost, schedule delays, and wasteful spending. Budgets should be all-inclusive of all vendors and core parts of your projects and be priced in dollar values as well as dollar per square foot values, cost per unit of area. You should also be sure to deduct any tax credits or any landlord credits that may be provided with your lease or property deal. Budgets evolve with the time and development of a project and thus should be tracked on at least an every other month basis. At the beginning of your project, you should request an initial budget based on the early drawings, which might be schematic plans, renderings, and also submit these to your choice of contractors to achieve a very early stage budget. The same process can be coordinated with other professionals such as MEP engineers, AV and IT designers, or other architects, and other project consultants. Only once you have a full set of design, construction, furniture, and systems drawings, that means AV and IT, only at that point can you submit your project for a lump sum or other bid to your vendors and procurers to understand the real cost of your project. As part of our professional financial course launching in April 2022, we'll be launching templates, online and offline, from which you can build your own project budgets for new builds and renovations. ArcoB also offers professionally managed tools for monthly fees, which also includes budget managements for your projects with one of our professionals and partners. Next comes cash flow. Now, understanding cash flow of a project from start to the end is very important from the very beginning of your project. Every stage of your project has very unique financial conditions. For instance, some vendors work with retainer payments and deposits while others do not and only bill on a monthly basis. Most contractors also require some form of pre-construction fee or deposits, and subcontractors often require deposits just to procure materials in the early stage of a build-out. Cash flow is important because it ties right into your overall project schedule and critical path. To be stuck waiting for a payment or an important deposit can hamper your schedule in very critical ways. Cash flow problems are the key fault of poorly planned construction projects and can critically stall projects and result in major debt obligations and major cost increases on your projects. Contractors don't just have supers and PMs sitting around for work, especially in this new decade. In fact, we're absolutely busier than ever before. All projects are planned and executed for a constant flow of work, including the procurement and arrival of material. So when a project entails a delay in one segment, especially due to lack of funds for payment, the entire process can go into jeopardy and stall, with the worst outcome possible being the loss of key resources like staffing on your project. So you must plan your project cash flow early and be sure to update it to track real costs per month, as well as the fees that are still due and planned for your project. Now the third thing is leveling. Now leveling is the act of comparing vendors and proposals on an even playing field. When we level proposals and services against each other, we're comparing each vendor on an apples-to-apples basis. There are key considerations to have in leveling. First, compare the costs broken out in the proposal. If costs are not included by a vendor, and you must check each proposal carefully, you must also request this in the form of revised proposals. Next, be sure to compare the costs of the alternates if they're not included or if they are included. Also, compare the team and staffing to ensure that your team is capable and focused. Compare the schedules offered by each vendor, and also, where it applies, be sure to evaluate procurement, delivery, and installation fees. For some scopes, such as IT and security, there are multiple configurations achieving the same result. And for such situations, be sure to also evaluate quantities of good compatibility with your native systems on your project, as well as long-term maintenance costs. Be sure your final cost includes all chosen options. And while numbers are one of the most important parts of the project, we think that the project team and ability to work with the owner and team holds extremely important weight and should be evaluated seriously for each vendor. Next up, we have cost tracking and reporting. So once your project gets going, it is important to start tracking all proposals, signed orders, quotes, and proposals, and also all the invoices and payments that are due to each vendor and also paid to each vendor. Owners and managers should start this process from the very beginning of a project and not just in the construction phase. When processing invoices, a properly defined CTR will show you the progress payments and balance remaining per vendor on the whole project, as well as the relationship between your budget of planned costs and the real hard costs actually spent on the project. The cost tracking report is one of the key templates and services we offer here at Arcobee. You can use your CTR to hold your vendors accountable, as plenty of them like to bill early because they just do, and also to manage the flow of your payments. So cost tracking ultimately feeds back into both the cash flow analysis and also into the project retention, which we'll talk about as number 6 in this video and article. Number 5 is to always have a contingency on your project. So adding a contingency on a project is a smart move and highly recommended. Many of your fears about budget overruns can be averted simply by including a contingency on the full project. Unfortunately, all projects of this nature encounter additional costing well into the construction build. There are several categories where contingency can be applied. So first is additional design changes or additions and reductions requested by the owner or manager. If, say, early, midway, or near the end of the project, an owner or manager would like to change the build-out and scope, the design and construction team will require additional costs to coordinate it and build, since these are owner-requested changes. Next, we have field conditions that necessitate changes to the design and the planned construction. For instance, a duct, sprinkler line, or electrical conduit may be in conflict with the planned installation and require one or all of those items to be relocated or redesigned. In another project I recently executed, we discovered a steel beam meant to support a stair was actually bowed downwards, and after the beam was exposed, only then we discovered it because it was initially encased in concrete. So the solution required additional steel bracing for the beam, necessitating additional costs in both labor and material. Finally, unfortunately, sometimes the design and construction team, they make mistakes. Unfortunately, even though we do our best to catch these issues during the design and the bidding and leveling phase before you even sign them up, professionals do make unintended mistakes and miss conditions on the project. Sometimes omissions are made that necessitate additional costs, and other times designers and contractors and subs exclude required scope that was already on the drawings. This is always supposed to be caught during the bidding and leveling phase, but unfortunately everybody makes mistakes. So we definitely recommend that you add a project-wide 10% contingency that is set in place once you actually achieve true costing of your project in hard design, construction, procurement, delivery, and installation costs. Similarly, contingency should be set up for vendor orders also at the time that orders are placed. Sometimes maintenance budgets may also require contingencies, which we'll cover in more detail in our course on maintenance. Finally, key item number 6 is the project retention. All owners should hold a retention on contractors and on subcontractors to be held in entirety until substantial completion, and then only released fully upon final completion of the punch list and of the entire project, signed up by the professionals. Retention is something that should be coordinated and agreed upon in the contract procurement and agreement stage, so this is not a surprise to any vendor or sub later in the project. Retention is stipulated as part of construction payment standards and we do not recommend working with suppliers or vendors, as is companies and you're buying products from, without holding retention on the projects. We typically recommend holding a retention of 10% on most vendors, and this is standard, unless they are signed off and completed with the punch list and signed off on the project. The retention can begin to be released once your project has achieved substantial completion. However, a 5% retention should also be held until you reach final completion, at which point it can be coordinated for a staggered release, first down to 2 or 3%, then to 1 to 2%, and then finally to 0. In April 2022, we'll be launching our Archibee Professional Financial Management course. This is where we teach you, as an owner and manager, the core skills to manage your renovation and new build projects financially. It is a comprehensive course that offers you the full spectrum of knowledge, tools, processes, and templates for managing your architecture and construction project, from the beginning of your project through to the very end. Our course is just 30 minutes a day over a span of 7 days. I also encourage you to participate in our Reach webinars once a month to get acquainted with more core skills to teach you, the owner and manager, about the project and financial management process in architecture and construction projects. Remember that just 30 minutes of learning a day will ensure that your project stays on time, on budget, and also built to a high standard. You'll also avoid tens, maybe hundreds, or even millions of dollars in costly delays and mistakes. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you here next time on Archibee.